who rule, we also have the period of the temple. The first temple period is almost concurrent with the first kingdom age, except that it started some 70 years, some 90 or 100 years later, because Saul ruled for 40 years, David ruled for 40 years, and it took Solomon some time to build the temple. So the temple really is a little bit later along in here. It didn't start right at 1050. But we have the first temple period that extended up until 586 BC when it was destroyed by Nebuchadnezzar. Then we have a second temple period that went from 516 BC, when it was initially rebuilt, all the way to 70 AD. And Herod's temple was just an expansion of this second temple that was started in 516 BC. There was never any other temple. It was always this second temple that began in 516 and went through 70 AD. And Herod made quite a improvement upon the building itself, but it was still just the second temple. There has been no temple. There has been no temple since that destruction in 70 AD. So when Daniel talks about in that 70th year, an abomination of desolation on the wing of the temple, or in the Holy of Holies, we have a pretty good idea that a third temple is going to be rebuilt. Right? Makes sense? Third temple is going to be rebuilt. I also believe that during the 7-year tribulation period, near the end of that, the temple, that third temple, is going to be destroyed. And so in the millennium, we're going to have a fourth temple built, not rebuilt, along the lines as described in Ezekiel 40 and onward. So there will be a fourth temple period that will be coincident with the second kingdom age. Now, in the news today is, with regard to that third temple, is that we do have the Palestinians claiming that the Jews are about to kick them off the temple and rebuild Temple Mount and rebuild the temple in Jerusalem. That's current news. What is also current news is the ultra-conservative Jews are preparing to rebuild a temple on the Temple Mount and to restore all of the temple sacrifices and rituals that were going on in the first and second temple eras. And so, although they're getting ready to do that, there's no movement to do that. Now, the covenant that the prince who is to come signs with the Jews is what is going to enable them to build the third temple. Otherwise, if things go on as they are today, we're not going to see that third temple rebuilt. Not in our lifetime if things continue to go along. And they may. This may be just another delay, or another upsurge in prophetic history, but I tend to believe that we're really near to the end. That's my own personal view, given what I see going on here. So that's how I kind of see the timeline laid out. I'll be glad to take questions for it later, but not right now. So let's move on. Okay, now there's some questions about this 70th week that need to be answered. When is it? Well, Jesus himself in Matthew 24, 15 says, "So when you see standing in the holy place the abomination that causes desolation, spoken of through the prophet Daniel, let the reader understand." So Jesus himself sees this abomination of desolation that was prophesied by Daniel occurring sometime in the future, when you see it. So it is future beyond Jesus. Who signs the covenant to initiate it? Well, the Jews who have been returned to the land in unbelief are going to sign a covenant with the Roman prince. And I don't want to say Antichrist. I want to come to 27, "And he shall make a strong covenant with many for 1 week." And we have to find out what the antecedent of he is. And the antecedent of he goes all the way back to the prince who will come is the closest antecedent of he. So the prince who is to come is Roman because it is the people of the prince who is to come who destroyed the city in AD 70. So we have a picture of who it is. It's a Roman prince. However, Rome can be characterized today, and there are many different ways to characterize Rome today, which we won't get into right now. So we do have a Roman leader or a European leader who is going to sign a covenant with the many, the Jews, to give them an opportunity to build their third temple. What is the wing of abominations? There must be 100 different definitions of what the wing of abominations is. This is part of the difficulty of translating the Hebrew into English. What we do know is the abominations is a plural word in the Hebrew, and it is hard to pin down just what those abominations are. And the wing, some people think the wing is a part of the temple, other people think it's not a part of the temple. It could be that just we have the abominations coming because of Revelation 13, which talks about the beast of the sea and the beast out of the earth, and that the second beast will cause the image of the first beast to be worshipped. Now that may or may not be part of this abominations that we see, but is certainly something to think about. There are quite a few parallels between the book of Revelation and Daniel. The book of Revelation can almost be looked upon as an expansion of that 70th week, because it talks about the 7-year tribulation that the Jews are going to experience. And then what is the decreed end? Well, Revelation 19:20 says that the first beast and the second beast are going to be thrown into the lake of fire. That is their decreed end. At the end of the Battle of Armageddon, they become toast, if you like that literal understanding. Okay, we're moving along pretty good here. And so we come back here. And why am I coming back here? Because we want to look at descriptions of wars. Okay. Now in Daniel, he talks about war and desolations. After the city is destroyed, he talks about more war and desolation. Let me ask you a question. Until Israel regained the land in 1948, what was going on in the land from AD 70 until 1948?
Palestinian settlements. Not entirely.
No. No, there were wars and desolations going on. It was a virtually uninhabitable land. It could not support agriculture. It could not support a people. And there were wars going on continuously because of its key geographic location as a land bridge between Africa and Asia and Europe. And so we had the Crusades, we had the invasions from the east that overtook the land. So this is a rather general but specific description of what happened to the land and the city of Jerusalem over hundreds of years. If you look up a history, Google a history of Jerusalem, and you will see how many times it changed hands and what was going on. This is a major, just nothing going on. And were the Jews involved at all in that time? Well, not until the 1880s when they started to return to Palestine, and then in 1948 they were given the mandate by the UN to resettle there and declare a state. But wars and desolations were the watchword. And so Daniel 11 and 12 is a very convoluted description of the kinds of wars and desolations that will go on there. Isaiah 17:1 says, Damascus is destroyed. An oracle concerning Damascus. See, Damascus will no longer be a city, but will become a heap of ruins. Is there any chance of Damascus becoming a heap of ruins in our lifetime? Yeah, I think so too. So here's the Old Testament prophet Isaiah writing in 722 BC. Damascus is going to become a heap of ruins. It's never been a heap of ruins, but it's going to become a heap of ruins. Okay, Zechariah 13:8 says 2/3 of Israel will be struck down. When? During the tribulation period, as God purifies his people and prunes out those who do not believe or will not believe, leaving a remnant of 1/3 of the people who will become believers in the Lord Jesus Christ. And Ezekiel 38 and 39 talks about a war of Gog and Magog. Most commentators understand Gog as being Russia and Magog as being a leader in Russia. And that this war of Gog and Magog, Gog is going to line up with Persia. What is Persia today? Iran. And bring war to the holy city. What are we reading in the news today? Putin and the chief general of Iran are working together with the president Bashar al-Assad. I wouldn't want to be living in Israel today, other than if I were a believer and I knew I could trust God for my safety. Okay, Matthew 24, 15 to 21 is a description of that whole 70th year, the tribulation period. I'm not going to read that right now. Daniel 12:1 says, At that time shall arise Michael, the great prince, who has charge of your people, and there shall be a time of trouble such as never has been since there was a nation till that time. But at that time your people shall be delivered, every one whose name shall be found written in the book, and many of those who sleep in the dust of the earth shall awake. And so Daniel is concluding this further vision of the wars that go on during the tribulation period, and as is Jesus in his discourse in Matthew 24. Okay, and in Revelation 6, 1 to 8, we have the description of the 4 horsemen, and it's all war. And it's the white horse, one who rides out to conquer. The red horse is war. The pale horse is death as a result of war and famine. And the, what's the last horse? No, it was white, red, pale, black. The black horse of plagues and famine as well as continuing war. So this whole idea is that the first part of this tribulation period is going to be a period of intense war. And that's what Daniel was talking about. We are going to see war going on and on. And so I come back here and I would say, I think I'm going to be able to close out tonight. I want to come back here and say, okay, the next thing I would be talking about would be the millennium, but we've run out of time to do that. Nope. So the millennium. Although Daniel doesn't talk about the millennium, there's nothing up here in Daniel. We do see that there is I am going to say a word about the millennium tonight. And that is millennium descriptions. The Davidic covenant gives David an eternal promise to rule, that his descendants would be on the throne eternally. And in Luke 1:33, that's Gabriel's promise to Mary, that her son would be an everlasting king. And then Revelation 24 talks about reigning for 1,000 years. And then these passages are all wonderful passages in the Old Testament that describe what will be going on in the millennium. They don't call it the millennium. This is essentially the eternal rest that God promised to his people that they have not yet achieved, but they will achieve it at the time of the millennium. And what I'd like to do is close out reading from Zechariah, 14, 16 to 21. Then everyone who survives of all the nations that have come against Jerusalem shall go up year after year to worship the King, the Lord of hosts, and to keep the Feast of Booths. And if any of the families of the earth do not go up to Jerusalem to worship the King, the Lord of hosts, there will be no rain on them. And if the family of Egypt does not go up and present themselves, then on them there shall be no rain. Then there shall be the plague with which the Lord affects the nations that do not go up to the Feast of Booths. This shall be the punishment to Egypt and the punishment to all the nations that do not go up to keep the Feast of Booths. And on that day there shall be inscribed on the bells of horses, holy to the Lord. And the pots in the house of the Lord shall be as the bowls before the altar. And every pot in Jerusalem and Judah shall be holy to the Lord of hosts, so that all who sacrifice may come and take of them and boil the meat of the sacrifice in them, and there shall no longer be a traitor, Trader, in the house of the Lord of hosts on that day. A description of what is going to go on in the time of the millennium. I find it hard to believe that there will be no second kingdom age and no temple period. But that's a result of all of those other passages that we didn't read. And so I would submit to you that what I have described to you tonight is what is a classical dispensational view, dispensational premillennial view, that the Lord will return before the millennium, that he will rule in the millennium and then on into the everlasting state. And that the signs of the times that we see raging around us today fall in line with this view. This view is a significant foundation for looking at the signs and putting them in their proper perspective. And so I hope this has been a useful presentation to you to understand how everything fits together and how it's all being orchestrated by God. This was God's revelation to Daniel. This wasn't something he dreamed up. It came via Gabriel, who stood in God's presence. Okay.